Thank you for welcoming the first presenter, and you'll see that I am not Clement Branche. I am Dr. Keisha Mitchell. And we will be speed reading or speed talking through this presentation, managing time, but also giving you the salient points of the presentation, and we can fill in gaps as we go. Now, so social affirmation and introduction. The architect of the social affirmation framework is in our midst, Clement Branche. It's always intimidating to present in front of the architect of a new Caribbean social theory, which is what we're using to inform our discussion about Caribbean human resource development. However, if I miss anything, I'm sure Mr. Branche is here to correct all of us. Abstract. Social affirmation is a Caribbean psychosociocultural framework focused on challenges and the transcendental possibilities of collective self-identity and integrity within a post-colonializing Creole plantation context. In this introduction, we focus on the integration of several traditions which inform social affirmation, namely the poeticist, the psycho-existential, the social, psychological, and the sociological, in exploring Caribbean collective self-identity through the moments of defense, transgression, and transcendence. Quickly, the Caribbean, most people know what it is, we live in it, but the Caribbean is a mix of land masses stretching from the Bahamas down to the Twin Island Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, and including the mainland countries of Guyana in South America and Belize of Central America. In 1976, Brathwaite surmised that in the 70s, our research will have to equip us to more precisely observe, account for, and assess agents of change. The change is material, spiritual, and electronic. That's media for you, technology. In the inter and outer metropoles, and the processes of change within and between the inner and outer plantation. And we shall have to try to describe these specifically and totally as socio-national phenomena, as regional phenomena, and as hemispheric occurrences. We believe that the social affirmation framework is actually a response to Brathwaite's call from 1976, 38 years ago. However, social affirmation, then in sum, for us to remember, is a Caribbean psychosociocultural framework focused on the challenges and the transcendental possibilities of collective self and identity integrity. So we're weaving all of these together as we pull the fragments of a Caribbean diaspora together in a post-colonializing Creole plantation context. And the affirmation addresses the problems of the self in the Caribbean. So the self, just so we understand what the self is the agent in all exchanges. It's never unitary, it's a multidimensional and multi-level structure, and it allows the evaluative regulation of experience and behavior as mediated by imagination, thought, and by socially produced anchor points and definitions of valued experiences, so thoughts and experiences. Identity is equally multi-level and multidimensional. In individual terms, identity is a dynamic construct, and it's produced through an ongoing evaluative narrative of the situated struggles of making one's way in the world. So with identity comes scripts and roles. Thank you very much. I'm seeing 15 minutes. So Baumeister defined the self. Baumeister identifies how the self became a problem in the course of European historical development. He points to issues such as self-knowledge, self-definition, fulfillment, and relation of the individual to society. So in this conference, we're looking at the self in relation to work Are we fulfilled in work? What do we know about the self? What are your talents? What are your gifts? What are your abilities? Are you engaged in the workplace? That's what we're looking for in terms of the self. Orlando Patterson's work, which is what we're building on in terms of understanding a Caribbean social theory with regards to work, introduces the problem of natal negation and affirmation, which is why we talk about social affirmation, okay? And this quote from Patterson helps us to define natal alienation, and this is where he says all our problems start. Once we're celebrated from that mother connection to the womb. The loss of ties of birth in both ascending and descending generations. It also has the important nuance of a loss of native status or deracination. It was this alienation of the slave from all formal, legally enforceable ties of blood and from any attachment to groups or localities other than those chosen for him by the master that gave the relation of slavery its particular value to the master. The slave was the ultimate human tool, as imprintable and as disposable as the master wished. So this is capturing our plantation legacy and the foundation, the historical context of work as we know it in the Caribbean today. The social affirmation framework then is a pulling together of several ideologies that we introduced before as we consider our Caribbean social theory with regards to work. At the top, you'll see a collective identity in this framework proposed by Branche and Morgan in 2011. The collective identity, think of it as a Caribbean nationality. Jamaican, St. Lucian, Trinidadian, how many others are represented in the room? American, Grenadian. You can think of it as a national identity. You can also think of the collective identity as the organization that you work for. So if you work for Grace Kennedy or the University of the West Indies or Guardsman or Sandals or the Bank of Jamaica, any place that you work up, that's your collective identity. The collective identity influences the collective esteem, the feelings that you have as a group towards the organization, inside and outside. On the other side of the collective is the personal identity. From the collective identity, you can select scripts or roles of identities that are important to you. Supervisor, manager, janitor, receptionist. Their identities within the organization, and with those identities come scripts and roles that you act out on a stage as you negotiate that organization. Sorry, didn't change that slide. At the bottom then, as you negotiate these roles or scripts or identities, there are feelings that you have towards the positions that you hold and these scripts that you act out. And so this is essentially the social affirmation framework. That framework that we just looked at is informed by these traditions, integrating traditions. Caribbean poetics, literature, thought, imagination. Historically, there was no record of Caribbean psychology documented anywhere. We had to extrapolate an understanding of the Caribbean psyche from history, literature, anthropology, sociology, and pull it all together as we understand Caribbean psychology. And so this process of creating the social affirmation framework is actually to document a legacy of Caribbean psychological thought. In sociological social psychology, as an integrating framework, Branche uses that to say that the sociological ideology alone, sociological theory, does not capture fully the experience of the Caribbean psyche. You cannot just look at group elements and understand the individual processes that are informing the interchange between people in the workplace. And so a broader sociological, social psychology and psychology has to be deliberately interwoven into this understanding of the Caribbean person as they work and as they live. Third, a Fanonian psycho-existentialism, understanding that the self is related to the society in terms of the self and other the other represents a structure. And at the boundaries of self and other, you actually become aware of your limits and your ability to influence your environment. And that external other to you also reveals to you the extent of your influence and defines your boundaries within the organization, within your neighborhood, within your community. And lastly, a sociology of power approach, understanding that there's a power relationship in every interaction. And it's only through power and power hierarchies, general manager, CEO, administrative assistants, janitorial staff, clerks, whatever. As you come down in the hierarchy, you have less and less power in the relationship, and so you are takers of decisions that are made at the top. Your political influence is curtailed. So those are the traditions that have essentially informed the social affirmation framework and Caribbean social theory as we talk about work. And that is what you'll be hearing the rest of the panel actually discuss as they speak to the responses that we have made as Caribbean people towards plantocracy, our struggles for freedom, our struggles for power, to be powerful rather than be helpless and powerless. So we come to the point where social affirmation then is essentially summed up as the struggle for transcendental collective selves and identities in a historical context of negation, denying blackness, denying negritude, denying the black skin and putting on a white mask, defense, transgression, and affirmation. And we come to the point of this marvelous, magical, or marvelous realism. We exist in terra firma. We exist in a life that has to be negotiated from person to person in an organization that has somehow developed out of these fragments of Caribbean human beings, having begun in Europe, Africa, Asia, or some other parts of the world, and found ourselves flung in the Caribbean to live and to grow. Final thoughts as we sum. The social affirmation framework then provides a way of celebrating rather than criticizing the efforts of Caribbean nationals at work. The outside world in the outer plantation has much to tell us about our shortcomings, of which there are indeed many. However, without committing crimes and overcoming tremendous obstacles to do so, we have created successful Caribbean people and successful organizations, which you can think of. The range of application of the framework celebrates the people's commitment to their goals while appreciating the challenges of the smallness of the Caribbean space which they have had to confront. It also recognizes that identity creation is a dynamic and ongoing process and is not an end goal. Thank you so much, and we will let the other presenters develop these thoughts.